Well, all right, welcome back to As It Should Be. Paul Bertolino here, and, well, it's time for another Ranking the Albums video, and it's high time that Stevie Wonder was represented on this channel. Yeah, it's time to discuss Stevie Wonder, and, well, I'm going to rank, so I'm going to rank his albums, but I'm only going to rank his 70s albums, okay? Which means, his 8 70s albums. He has a pretty large catalog, right? Ton of albums from the 60s, ton of albums from the 70s, well, a few albums from the 70s, albums from the 80s, a couple from the 90s, and later. Overall, a lot of albums. But I'm just going to do the 70s albums. Why? Because those are the only albums that my outfit match. My outfit won't go with the woman in red. Well, kind of, but yeah. I'm only doing the 70s albums because those are the best albums, and that's the period. Basically what it is that after Hotter Than July, things get rough. Okay? And I don't really know a lot of those albums that well, and I'm not going to go and dig through, In Square Circle and all that shit. And the 60s albums are great, but that is just, that's a bit, how do I explain this? I don't want to do the 60s albums. I want to do the 70s albums. That's why I'm doing it. So there. So yeah, basically that's the deal. But, come on. You all know the 70s Stevie Wonder albums are like, the creme de la creme. That's the good and proper Stevie Wonder, right? And, well, for the most part. And, well, I don't know. Why don't we just get right on into it? Okay, so coming in at number 8, at the very bottom of the list, as if you didn't suspect, is Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. Yeah, okay. This is Stevie Wonder's last album for the 70s. This came out in October 1979. And now, for me, this album snuck out. I had no idea that it existed. It was a few years before I had any idea that this record came out. And it was a soundtrack for a documentary called Secret Life of Plants. And, it was a double album, a sprawling double album, his follow-up to Songs in the Key of Life. And, yeah, it didn't have any major radio hits, and it just did not have even 1/100th the impact that Songs in the Key of Life, or really any of the albums prior to it, had. Stevie at the Beach probably had greater impact than this album. But I didn't know about this album until around 86, I think, around 1985, 86. I was 16, and I was I had an English class, and I had, my teacher was Mr. Wood, Mr. Morris Wood. Shout out to Mr. Wood. He died in 2011. R.I.P. Mr. Wood. But Mr. Wood was this old guy with giant glasses that you wouldn't think would know any of your music, right? Or would know any sort of popular music. He looked like he was kind of a classical music kind of a guy. But he would talk music in class, and turned out he really loved Pink Floyd. He would talk about Pink Floyd all the time, and he really especially loved The Wall. That was like a masterpiece to him, and he talked about this stuff all the time. And one of the albums that he really would name check quite a lot and talk up quite a bit was this album, Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. And he talked so much about this record, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I didn't even know about this record. I'm like, wait, so there's another epic double album by Stevie Wonder from the 70s, and it's the follow-up to Songs in the Key of Life? I'm in. I went to the record store and I bought a copy, and I didn't buy a new one, though. Luckily, by 86, you could get it, used for $3, which is how I got mine. And that was lucky. That was very lucky, because I got that thing home, and I put it on and was like, okay, next song. Next song. And that's the way it went all the way through the album, and I kind of went, okay, guess this is why I haven't heard of it. Yeah, and you know what? That is why this album is at the bottom of the list. I'm not saying that every single song, it sucks. There's a couple of pretty good songs on it, but overall, it's a big head scratcher, guys. But, you got to give it to Stevie Wonder. He'd been on quite a jag up to that point. I mean, he kind of deserved a moment to just kind of do something really lame that he just really wanted to do, just for himself. Why not? So, I mean, whatever. I don't think it's a very good album. A lot of people don't think it's a very good album, although some do. Mr. Wood really loved it. But I don't begrudge Stevie Wonder his indulgences, right? Why not? All right, so coming in number 7 is 1971's Where I'm Coming From. Now, this is sort of a pivotal moment in Stevie Wonder's career. This is a moment when he really decided that he really wanted to stretch out, kind of get outside that Motown box, and this is really the first album where he does that. And interestingly, this album came out maybe about a month or two before What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, so it really isn't that he saw Marvin Gaye doing it and went, ooh, I want to do that. I mean, he was on his own path, and he was ready to, go on to his own thing. And now, this is the last album Stevie Wonder did under his original Motown contract, and there was a clause in that contract where when he turned 21, he would be able to void the contract. And right at this point was when he turned 21, and he knew he was going to meet resistance from Berry Gordy and those guys if he wanted to kind of have complete creative control. So when they came at him with a new contract saying, hey, let's renegotiate, he went, nah, we're going to do the void thing. And he used that as leverage to get what he wanted and to really get a new contract where he had complete creative control and did whatever he wanted. And, luckily that worked. Now, this album, it's the first album where it's all original material. There are no covers, there are no outside writers. Some of the songs are co-written by his wife, Sarita Wright, but it's all Stevie Wonder tracks, all Stevie Wonder songs or co-writes. And now, I first got this record when I was in high school, and I really loved the big single from the album, If You Really Love Me, one of his great songs, one of his great tracks that I still love. So I was really excited to get this record, and it looked really groovy. The cover looked really cool. Like, he looked really cool in his suit, in the pictures on the cover with the Punch-Out Mobile. His Punch-Out Mobile, Alabama. No, his Punch-Out Mobile. And when I picked up a copy, you could get used copies for $3 back in those days, as I mentioned with the last album. And so I picked it up and I went home and I listened to it, and I wanted to like it so much more than I actually did. And I kept going through it, and it's really not a bad record, but he's definitely not there yet. He's definitely not there yet. He's pointing in the right direction. You can see clear where he's headed, but it's just really not as good as the records that came after it. And I went and I listened to it again, preparing for this video, and thought, well, maybe I'll feel differently now, because I haven't heard it in a long time. And I went through it and was like, no, I basically feel exactly about this album that I did when I was in high school. Yeah, so number 7. Okay, so coming in number 6 is Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. Yeah, this is Stevie Wonder's very first album of the 70s. This came out in 1970, the summer of 1970, and it's his 12th album. Now, yeah, that's how prolific he was. I mean, when he got to his 12th album, he only was up to 1970, and he was only 20 years old. I mean, come on. So like I was saying at the beginning of the video, yeah, there's a lot. He has quite a lot of albums in his catalog, and well, this is of course his last album where he's really kind of still having to do the Motown, like toe the Motown line, and do covers and do, songs from outside writers. One of the songs that he did on this album was a cover of the Beatles' We Can Work It Out. And, this is a very unpopular opinion, but I'm not really that big on that cover. In fact, I know people who really love that cover, and I bet you do too. It's not bad. I mean, I don't dislike it. There are a lot of, I'm a big Beatles doof, and but there are actually some Beatles covers, other people doing Beatles songs, where I actually kind of like the cover better than the Beatles version. This just isn't one of them. The thing about Stevie Wonder doing it is that it just kind of just sounds like just another Motown track. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of, say, Elton John came in and he did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and he made it a completely different thing. I mean, he made a song out of this, and, the arrangement and the whole vibe of it, I mean, he turned this whole thing on its ear, right? Now, Stevie Wonder did a radically different version from the way the Beatles did it, but the thing is that the Beatles version doesn't sound like anything else. It doesn't sound like any other Beatles track. It doesn't sound. It just. It's it kind of is its own thing in a way. And now the Stevie Wonder track, it sounds distinctly like Stevie Wonder, but it distinctly sounds like Stevie Wonder during this period where he hasn't really come into his own yet, and there's any number of Motown tracks that just sound exactly like it, that have the same beat and the same feel, and that is why I don't prefer it to the Beatles version, and that's why, I don't know. I don't know why I'm spending all this time talking down his cover of We Can Work It Out. I mean, there's so many other great songs in here, and Signed, Sealed, Delivered is a great single, and come on, I have it above Where I'm Coming From. I didn't see that coming. When I went over to review these albums and I went and I listened to this, I thought, you know what? I'm putting this above Where I'm Coming From. Who knew? Okay, so coming in number 5. Oh, man. This is going to be controversy right here. You guys are just going to be tearing your hair out over this, because so many of you guys are going to have this at number 1, and rightly so. I don't blame anybody. I only have it at number 5. Songs in the Key of Life. Yes, I only have Songs in the Key of Life at number 5. Now, it's not because I don't think it's a good record. It's just because I just like the albums I have above it on the list better. I just like those albums more. It isn't even necessarily that you can say that they're technically better albums. I just like the albums that I have above this one more. That's all there is to it. Obviously, this is a great record, and it's easily his biggest album. Now, boy, do I remember when this came out. I mean, this thing exploded in late 1976 onto the radio and everywhere, and, he won every Grammy in the book, and it was on the charts for, like, generations. And now, in 1975, after he had done Fulfilling His First Finale and, done the tour and won 80 million Grammys for that, he decided that he wanted to quit the music business altogether. He wanted to move to Ghana and start working with handicapped children. And he even went so far as to starting to plan a farewell concert. And then he changed his mind and decided to sign a new contract with Motown for like a 7-year contract for like $37 million, and which was like the biggest contract ever signed in history up to that point. And he set about making this double album. And it was supposed to come out in October of 1975, but, Stevie was in perfectionist mode, and he really was like trying to make, this badass album that he ultimately ended up making, and ended up stretching into the new year, and the record didn't come out till September 1976. So, I mean, he really, really, really worked hard and long on this record, and it paid off, of course, because as we all know, I mean, Songs in the Key of Life is probably one of the top 10 biggest albums of the entire decade, right? And I mean, there were. Let me look. I got a list here because I'm not going to remember off the top of my head because I'm stupid. I mean, 5 singles. I Wish, Isn't She Lovely, Sir Duke, As. There was another single, Another Star, from the album that I actually don't remember hearing on the radio. I mean, I don't know. That's just an album track to me. It may have. I don't know. I never really heard that on the radio. But I mean, all those other songs, you heard them every hour on the hour, all of them at the same time. And boy, I was really into this stuff. I didn't have the album, but I had the I Wish single, and what else? I loved these songs. I mean, in the 70s, I didn't actually have Stevie Wonder albums. I just knew his songs, and I loved them. But this was really the first album that I was aware of. When Fulfilling His First Finale came out, and Intervisions, and Talking Book, I almost said Talking Heads. I knew the singles on those records, and I knew it was Stevie Wonder, and I knew I liked Stevie Wonder, but I didn't go, oh, this song comes from this album. It wasn't until Songs in the Key of Life where I knew, oh, these songs are from this album. And yeah, I mean, well, and how could you not know? Because you couldn't avoid this album at the time. Now, why is this album so low on my list, other than the fact that I like the other albums more? I have tried with this record over the years, and while it is great, and I do like it, it is bogged down a little bit. It is a little... it's one of those albums where it needs to be trimmed back a bit. And it goes for the individual songs too. I mean, you go through it, and there's so many songs where I go, at about 3 minutes in, I go, okay, this song is done. And I look and I go, oh shit, there's like 4 more minutes left on this thing, and it doesn't really go anywhere. Like, the songs are just too long. There's too much fat. And as an overall listen, I can't. It doesn't go right here quite like the albums before it do, because they're just a little bit more tightly arranged, and the songs are just, I just like the earlier albums a little bit better. But man, there's so many great songs on this. Not only the singles, Have a Talk with God, and I mean, there's so many. There's more songs on this album than I can even mention. But they're just too long. They're too long, and some of the songs I don't think are as good as the songs on the previous albums. So, I mean, really, I guess what I'm getting at is that if I could edit this thing down to the best single album, not only that many songs, but cut the song lengths down, well, that might be a whole different ballgame. But as the album sits, I have it at number 5. Sorry. Okay, it's coming in at number 4. Is Music of My Mind. Yeah, Music of My Mind. Now, this is Stevie's first of 2 albums from 1972, and it's also his very first album under his new contract. Yeah, when he was doing Where I'm Coming From, he was negotiating, and he was kind of going, okay, this is what's going to happen now. But really, this is the first album he did under the new contract, and now he was really doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. And he went in there and he played every instrument himself except the trombone, and he brought in synthesizers. This is the album where he gets into synthesizers. Now, he brought in a couple of guys to help produce this album. Let me look over here because I don't remember the names. It's Robert Mogilev. Robert Margouleff, I don't know how to pronounce this, and and Malcolm Cecil. These are the guys who produced this album all the way through fulfilling this first finale, and they are the guys who developed the Tonto synthesizer, and they were the ones who really helped, kind of turned him on to like the ARP and the Moog and all that kind of stuff. And they're a big part of why these records during this coming up period here, 72, 73, 74, sound the way they do. And yeah, his creativity was in full flow on this album. I mean, you could say that some of the songs, what I was just saying about Songs in the Key of Life, there's a little bit of that going on in this record, where songs are maybe a little longer than they need to be, and he's getting a little self-indulgent. But I don't know, there's just something about this album that I like a bit more. I love Having You Around, Superwoman. Oh, Jesus, Superwoman, are you kidding me? I love every little thing about you. Happier Than the Morning Sun, and Evil, and all this kind of stuff. I think this is a bit of an underrated Stevie Wonder album. I mean, he definitely wasn't. He was kind of stepping up. Like, this is a couple of steps up, I would say, at least, from Where I'm Coming From, but not quite where he would go next with Talking Book. But, I have it here at number 4 because it's a really great album, and I know that you love it too, as you should, as it should be. Because coming in number 3 is the second of Stevie Wonder's 1972 albums, Talking Book. Yeah, this came out late in October 1972, and this is really where things explode. I mean, this is Music of My Mind is really technically the first album of his classic period, but this is the one where he really just like hits it. Like, everything that he's done up to this point, and the steps that he's taking to get to the next level and do his own thing, everything culminates in this. Which then, of course, builds and builds and culminates, I guess you could say, in Songs in the Key of Life. But, I mean, this record, again, the synthesizers and huge singles. I mean, huge number 1 singles. Superstition, You Are the Sunshine of My Life, which is one of my very, very, very favorites. Yeah, I mean, those songs both went to number 1 on the Billboard charts, as they should. And the album only went to number 3 on sort of the mainstream sort of pop chart. Of course, it went to number 1 in the R&B charts. It should have gone to number 1 in the pop charts. But, what are you going to do? But, of course, he won every Grammy in the book, and, the whole thing. This is kind of where that sort of string kind of begins, the Grammys and, the glowing reviews and the whole thing. And now, original copies of the album on the cover have his name and the title written in Braille. And on the back cover, there was a little bit of a message that he'd written that was only in Braille. You couldn't read it. If you didn't know how to read Braille, you couldn't read the message. But I have it written down here because Wikipedia. And what does it say? It says, "Here is my music. It is all I have to tell you how I feel. Know that your love keeps my love strong." So, come on, people. Stevie Wonder loves you, and he loves that you love him. And, well, it helped him, it nourished him to make albums like Talking Book and Inner Visions and Fulfilling This' First Finale. I mean, come on, everybody. Love Stevie Wonder, will you? Okay, so coming to number 2. Inner Visions. Yeah, Inner Visions. Yeah, I know, I only have it at number 2. You probably have it at number 1, right? Many consider this to be his greatest album. Now, this came out in 1973, in the summer of 1973, and, you know, of course, just like every album from this period, won all the Grammys, and, you know, stayed on the charts until the cows came home, and all that kind of stuff, right? And, you know, the critics were raving, and a million singles. I mean, it has... I shouldn't be having to look, right? But yeah, Living for the City's on here, and Higher Ground, 2 big singles. But it, I mean, also has great album tracks like Golden Lady and Don't You Worry About a Thing. And yeah, I mean, you know, Too High and Visions, and I mean, so many great songs on this record. Now, maybe about... What was it about? Maybe about a month? Oh, no, it was like 3 days a month. What I'm saying, it was 3 days after this album came out. Stevie had done a show in South Carolina, and he was driving back with his friend. You know, he had his friend Jim Harris. Is that his name? Let me look. I have my notes here. His friend John Harris, sorry, who was driving, and Stevie was in the passenger seat, and he was conked out. He was sleeping. And they're on the highway, and they're behind a huge truck piled high with logs, right? And the truck slammed on its brakes, and one of the, you know, the logs came loose and went flying everywhere, and one of the logs came through the windshield and bonked Stevie right in the head, full force. And man, blood, guts, and the lot, man. And they took him to the hospital, and he was in a coma for like 4 days. Like, they didn't know if he was going to make it. I mean, like, it looked like there was a Stevie Wonder death watch, you know, in the media, and, you know, family and friends and everybody like, oh my God, Stevie Wonder is going to die. And, you know, Stevie Wonder being Stevie Wonder, he said, I'm not going to die. I'm fucking Stevie Wonder. And somehow he pulled out of it. And, you know, he was out of sorts for a while, and he was in the hospital, and, you know, it kind of took him a while to get back to playing, because he was kind of afraid that because he'd lost, like, his sense of smell and stuff, and he was really worried that maybe he'd lost his ability to play. And he had a keyboard sitting there inside the hospital room, and it took him a while to, like, get up the courage to, like, put it on his lap and start pecking at it, right? But, of course, you know, come on. Stevie Wonder, he'll never lose that. No matter what happens, he'll be dead. He'll be like in his coffin, and you'll be able to put a keyboard in front of him, and he'll be like, right? So, of course, it was fine. And yeah, I mean, and how lucky are we that he survived this? I mean, could you imagine if Stevie Wonder had died only 3 days or just a few days after Inner Visions came out? I mean, no Fulfilling This' First Finale, no Songs in the Key of Life, you know. Okay, there wouldn't be Secret Life of Plants, but, you know, whatever, and Woman in Red. But, you know, come on. I mean, I can't even imagine. Anyway, Inner Visions. Okay, so coming in number 1. For all of you who've been paying attention, you know what it is. There's only one 70s album I haven't mentioned yet, or that I haven't ranked yet. And, well, Fulfilling This' First Finale. Yeah, Fulfilling This has the little apostrophe at the end, so that means it's possessive, and so that means it's Fulfilling This' First Finale. But that only makes the title even that much more of a mouthful. Not my favorite Stevie Wonder album title, but it is my favorite Stevie Wonder album. And how many of you people rate this one as the top one? I don't know if a lot of people rate this one as the best one, but it's my personal favorite. Man, I mean, this came out, July 1974, and, you know, 1 year after his accident. So only a year after that huge accident, I mean, where he was in a coma, like a log came at him full force and bonked him in the head and had him, on the street bloody. A year later, he has this album released, written, recorded, and released. Only Stevie Wonder could do that. But, of course, this album has a little bit more of a somber tone than the previous album. It's a little bit more sparsely arranged, but it's still chock-a-block with classics. I mean, what do you have? I mean, Boogie on Reggae Woman, You Haven't Done Nothing, which features Jackson 5 on that. Now, there's the line, Jackson 5, blah, 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 say doo-doo-wop. What does he say there? Jackson 5, blah, 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 say doo-doo-wop. Type it out in the comments. I never really was able to figure out. Jackson 5, blah, 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 say doo-doo-wop. But anyway, that's the Jackson 5 doing the BVs on that. And, there's They Won't Go When I Go, and Creepin', which has Minnie Riperton on the backing vocals, and she's also on Ain't No Use, which is another, oh my god, great track from that album. A favorite. And definitely my favorite song on this album. Love this song so much. The opening track, oh my god, Smile Please. That is just, I don't want to go on too much about this song because I'm going to be doing a ranking the Stevie Wonder songs video at some point, and I'll go into more detail about that song, but I fucking love this song so much. Okay? And that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason why this album's number one. But really, when I go back and I listen to it, just beginning to end, this is just the most satisfying album for me personally. And yeah, I feel like it. Yeah, well, I was going to say it doesn't get its due, but that's bullshit. This album is huge, just like all the other albums from that time. Yeah, I don't know, man. Fulfilling is his first finale. I mean, this is my Stevie album, man. So, Stevie, go out and do your tour where you do this album in its entirety, just like you did Songs in the Key of Life. Would ya? Because I want to see it. All right, well, there you go. There's my ranking of the 8 1970s albums of Stevie Wonder. And, I really would have liked to have put Hotter Than July on this list, but it's a 1980 album, and I decided I was really going to be strict on it's only the 70s albums thing, and so it's not on the list, but I would have liked to have ranked that album in here, and I think if I was to put it on the list, for anybody who might wonder, is I had Signed, Sealed, and Delivered at number 6, and Songs in the Key of Life at number 5. I probably would put Hotter Than July in between those two. But, so it's a little bit there's a bonus ranking for you, all right? And all the albums after that, bottom of the list. 60s, that's a whole other ball game, and I don't know if I'll ever get into that. What are you going to do? So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching the videos, and thank you for people who have subscribed. I can't talk right now. It's getting late. And, well, for those of you who haven't subscribed, subscribe. And click the little bell if you do. And if nothing else, comment and like and all that kind of stuff. It's very helpful. And I appreciate everybody who's been subscribing lately. People have been coming on board, and that's really cool. And I really do appreciate it. And, yeah, I don't know. We'll see how long I can keep this going, right? All right, well, I'll see you guys next time.